Okay, so we just started talking about the fact that the kind of, forgive the English, clusterfuck that we've been sort of trying to deal with, um,
Yeah.
it, trying to figure out and parse apart, has to do, in my opinion, with a level of consciousness. And it absolutely has to do with spiritual sovereignty. And you and I have presented a few times for different groups around the concept of spiritual sovereignty and what it means to be a sovereign individual, heart, mind, body, and soul, your consciousness, to develop your consciousness and be aware and self-regulated, meaning you have theory of mind. You get that you get that there are groups of people that your actions and your words impact, and that and so the decorum that's required of people who are participating within our state's assemblies, within official positions to help us run locally the things that we're doing and to help us achieve our desired outcomes, to run the government locally, to assist our entire state and our entire country in being free and being sovereign and being a people at peace
Hmm.
and living a life of freedom and joy, requires you to comprehend boundaries and a consequence of actions and words and thought. And so to me it feels like a spiritual sovereignty, an understanding of spirit, not an understanding of religious dogma, but an
Yeah.
understanding and being able to stand in your sovereign self and recognize that other beings are sovereign and that
Hmm.
they have a right to sovereignty as much as you do. And how do we most work together collectively? How do we do this? We need a basic structure.
We
We need
do.
a
We
structure.
do. Right.
That that
That's
what
important. Right.
and when I started talking about it,
And
there was a lot of activity. So um so spiritual sovereignty. Yeah.
or yeah. All right. I'm going to shut my video off for 1 second because I'm getting low bandwidth.
Yeah.
How's that? Is that a little better? You can hear me?
I
I'll
can
come
hear
back
you.
on when it
I can hear
clears.
you perfectly.
So, oh, all right. The other thing too that people need to realize is that just because you can participate in a particular way that you would like to doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And so again, it comes back to the responsibility. We need people who are qualified to be in specific roles, doing activities relating to specific roles. For
Which doesn't
instance,
mean that we can't, that further on down the road, that those of us who don't know how to satisfy the requirements of those roles can't learn how to
yeah,
do that,
right,
learn how to
right.
do and take on more responsibilities and more active participation down the road. But it doesn't make sense, for example, for me to attempt to take on your role as treasurer when that's not a skill that I hold.
Yeah, and you're not going to say, but it's my right. It is my right to hold whatever position I want, which is the
No.
languaging that we're hearing from the people that don't
Yeah.
seem to get that it's also your responsibility to recognize your limitations and to apply whatever, if that's what you want, then you need to apply yourself to making yourself have that capacity. And so this
Correct.
also comes down to qualified people being in positions. And there seems to be this big perception that just because somebody has a pulse and they want to, they should they should be able to do that and it's their right. And I'm saying that eventually, yeah, it is your right. It's the right for all to be considered. However, you also have to know where you're coming from. I mean, and this is an example I'm going to give because on the banking committee, when we first set that up, and the banking committee is probably the only actual committee that has followed the process up to this point, according to what the federation, deems and directs us to do. We were all vetted by the Continental Marshals and the Federation. So we went through the entire, having our past looked at, having all of our references contacted. The marshals really dug deep. They wanted to get to know us. They wanted to know where we were coming from, how, what we felt about certain things and how we've behaved in the past, because that's really important. And one of the four people was not recommended. And
Mhm.
and turns out something was going on with the activities that he was involved in at the time, which, was for him to protect his own assets, and he was working on that off. But what ended up happening was, the FBI came knocking on his door.
Oh, geez.
He's no longer he basically, he taking the responsibility that he did not want to bring that association into assembly, and he stepped back. So he's not part of assembly, and ever since he's been going through issues relating to that. But, this is the thing. You need to recognize and be responsible to the group, and recognize that safety and a safe, container of protection is our sacred role in assembly. And realize, if you are not there where you can step forward and not be a liability, that you should not even consider doing that. And you really don't have the right to insist, which is kind of what we're dealing with. People are stuck on what they perceive as their individual rights, and they're not looking at any part of responsibility.
Right.
So anyway,
Yay. Glad your camera's on.
all right, I think it's okay now. We'll see.
Okay,
So
groovy.
anyway, so
Awesome.
anyway, so we're moving forward on that, because, we need to, and all the assemblies apparently have been going through the same sort of issue. And it's a learning curve. It's also an evolution. We will get there as long as we don't quit. That's the thing. We can't
Yeah.
quit. We can't
We're all developing that consciousness, right? We're developing that muscle. We're trying to
Mhm.
lean into that muscle memory around when we used to be able to do this with one another, right? When our ancestors used
Right.
to be able to do this with one another. We have that skill. We're remembering how to debate and not attack. How to just function from that
Yeah.
place of, I said this like multiple times today, but how to function from within that decorum where you're a person at peace and you're self-regulated, you're in control of yourself.
Yep.
You're not um incoherent or regulated by your emotions or by situations so much that you can't see the bigger picture of what it is that we're trying to do, and to just kind of hold
Mhm.
back um a little bit to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to move because I kept getting bandwidth issues. So I'm downstairs, closer to the hive of the electrical signal and all that. So here we
Okay.
are.
So what
Yeah.
else did you want to talk
Yeah.
about?
So all right. So I wanted to bring up something that I learned today, and I just learned the initial concept. I haven't done the research, but I was
Okay,
having a conversation with,
do you want to stop the recording and start the recording again because we're talking about a new subject?
well, it's kind of related.
Okay,
I'm just
go.
going to talk about the masculine and feminine. All
Okay.
right. Because it's a good segue. Because you're talking about, we need to learn to all get along. And if you think back about what was going on in 1776, it was it was all men. There were no women. Now, I learned today, and I need to follow up and do some research, but I find it absolutely intriguing. I did not know that the original papers, the working papers for the Declaration of Independence and the original Constitution, the first Constitution, were all contained within a library in Arlington, which was burned to the ground, and with it, all of the paperwork. And apparently,
That is a common
the
practice.
original,
I don't know if you're aware of
sure,
that
to
common
hide, right,
practice. Right. This is
the
what gets
cabal,
talked
of
about
course.
when people are talking about Tartaria and mud floods, is that when they're getting ready
Yep,
to do
exactly.
something nefarious, oh geez, there's a big fire, right?
Yeah, I know exactly. The Great Fire of Chicago, all of that, right, exactly. Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
yeah. It definitely was deliberate. However, from what and apparently I don't again I don't know, but there are books written, and I need to follow up. I need to get my hands on that. I need to read it for myself. But apparently, the way that the original deliberations and within the work papers, the original Declaration of Independence was written in the language of the feminine. However, and the Constitution as well. So it was definitely more in line with the way that the Iroquois Confederacy, which was the Council of Elders, which was males and females together, the wisdom of
I couldn't,
all.
couldn't contain it.
Right. But see,
Moved
that's
by my
originally,
emotions.
but if you see what came out of it is now a very masculine document. It's a very action oriented document. And remember, what's the difference? Like, we're talking creation energy. Feminine is magnetic, it's receptive. Masculine is electric, it is active. And so the two together are what equal creation. And so we are coming at a time now in history where we have participation of the feminine and the masculine. We must bring that back and integrate in order to create something lasting.
The divine masculine and the divine feminine. I don't, and so this for
Yeah.
me is why it didn't work before. Maybe why it didn't work before, because of the ability, the fact that we have functioned for so long in neither the divine masculine or the divine feminine.
Right. The toxic
And
archetypes,
how,
the
yes,
shadows.
we've been functioning from the toxic programming
Yep.
that we have, that we were steeped in for generations and generations and generations.
Right. Right.
Being able to work on the self and come out of that, to recognize that, is part of becoming sovereign.
Right. Right. Part of becoming sovereign. All right. Now I'm going to end the recording because we're going to start again and we're going to talk about that other thing.